Welcome back to the Roundtable, Episode 3. Thanks as always for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. Today in the studio we have Brad Serf and Bill Cerney. Both are principals with Gibson Insurance. Their market is construction, but where our worlds collide is around cybersecurity. Here at VCIO Global, we bring governance, solutions, and process around that for organizations. Brad and Bill give a policy to help give you options on how to cover and make sure when, not if, when an incident occurs, that you have the proper protections. They're going to sit in the host chair. I'm going to be their guest. We do a little pregame and intros. So what are the areas that we talk about? Artificial intelligence. That's a mainstay and feels like in every conversation we have. But the level of sophistication and how they use it, you need to be aware of these tactics. Make sure you're covered. Make sure you're protected. Lots of different things we get into. Interesting conversation. Looking forward to getting this started. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back. Today, Brad and I are joined by Tony Darden of VCIO Global to talk to us today about security in the cyber world. Tony, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't we start off giving a little bit of your background and that of your company?
Sure. So I've been in the IT space since I was in fifth grade.
They had IT back then?
Their version of it.
Oh, okay.
I remember there's the Apple IIe, and that was like, the monitors that weigh 400 pounds. Those were the days.
Green and using a little, what was it? The Oregon Trail? That's what I remember back in.
Oh, okay.
Now, I learned basic language back in the 80s. Is that a language you became familiar with?
That was my first language. That's what got me hooked. Yeah, and I feel like I haven't left it. But the first 20 years of my career was based on application development, and then I got into the management space, and a bit of a change because I always loved being a creationist. That was always, but it exposed me to the pains that come with oversight, and very quickly it migrated to how do you secure an operation, because the threat actors aren't going away, and so what we do at VCIO Global is we provide a service for businesses that may not feel they can afford a C-suite level IT leader.
Okay.
We scratch that itch. It's technically we're a fractional CIO company. So when you think of oversight and strategy, team mentorship, building up a function, even project implementations, we have a wide variety of services. But some of the pillars are security. You have to secure your organization. The delicate needle to thread is how do you secure an organization and make it usable for folks? Because no one ever thanks you for how fast their computer's going with all this security oversight.
Well, right. We can lock everything down so that nobody can use it, and it can't access the external world, and that's great. But not very practical.
We always say, look, if you want 100% security, you fire everybody.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah,
most dangerous thing you can do is hire an employee, right?
That's right.
But you have to do it.
These pesky humans, yeah.
Makes me think that ships are safest in the harbor, but they weren't built to stay in the harbor.
Right? That's exactly right. So that's what we do. And now companies are saving a lot of money, but they're having that counsel and that strategy and that oversight.
And the thought, though, is that you are providing that leadership. You're not necessarily providing the guys that are plugging wires into this port or that port, right?
Yeah, that's a great call out. Like, this model works if you have a strong MSP or you have boots on the ground. Otherwise, that's not the space we play in.
And I assume that if that isn't necessarily the strong suit of a company, still having you come in, you can have provide them with partners, folks that or help them select or hire. Correct. The boots on the ground.
Oh yeah, we love building teams. So while we'd love to have engaged clients forever, if we can help elevate an organization, help secure them, and help build up a team, and now someone on that group has rose to that level, that's a win.
Fantastic. Well, Brad and I, we work primarily in the construction space. We're asked constantly about cybersecurity. We certainly help our clients procure the insurance coverage that can come along with the cyber risks out there. In your mind, and we can get into a little bit about the actual procurement of that coverage, but what are the basics that people need to be making sure they have in place in today's world?
MFA, I mean, you're going to hear a lot of acronyms, but MFA is by far, if you're not using some...
Multi-factor authentication.
Multi-factor authentication, that's right. If you're not using some form of that, that's a staple, that's a non-starter. I mean, you have to have that. Comprehensive phishing program, I believe, is also important. My favorite phishing exercise is around the holidays, where you get these 50% off, Best Buy, click here. We want people to click, not to put a scarlet letter on them, but to help educate. Because on the heels of having a strong phishing campaign is you want to have a robust security program or security training program. Back to humans. That's the weak link. So you have to constantly educate them and have those phishing campaigns. That's part of the education. Multi-factor authentication, and you can't have unfettered access to your computers. We got to have some level of lockdown. You'll still get the programs you need to be productive, and if someone has to check their Gmail, I mean, we're not here to be overseers, and
right.
You got to find the balance. But those are, I mean, it's a C-scroll list of things, but if you got those first things covered, I know
just the idea of the phishing campaigns and the clicking of a link, as you said, you don't want it to be that scarlet letter. But when someone does that and then they're called out, they're heightened in their diligence going forward. I say that it wasn't actually a phishing campaign, although we have our company certainly has those tools in place all the time, and you see those come across.
Vulnerability testing, we might be sent something from HR or the president of the company. It makes you want to I got to open this one for sure.
Yeah.
I have, you have a point there I want to bring out, but I just thinking of stories, and I'm sure you guys have a million. I had an employee with the company I was with, my last assignment. He was in the checkout line with a handful of gift cards because he was texted by the owner.
Oh yeah.
Brad, how many of these have we talked about?
That was a pretty common one.
Yeah,
and believable. Because if they're in your system, they know that, hey, I'm in Atlanta at a conference, and but I need these gift cards for the employee awards later today. I need you to get them real quick.
It's amazing what you can publicly find to leverage. So he was in the checkout line, and he's sitting there thinking, and so I love hearing these stories because it feels like we're doing things right. He goes,
"Oh, by the way, we just need the number scratched off the back, right?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he just went through training like a week ago, and he reflected on this, and he called me, and I didn't recognize the number, but I picked up, and hey, this is so and so. I'm in checkout line with gift cards that came from the CEO. What do you think? I think you should put them back on the shelf, and we'll worry about it another day.
Yeah.
But my point I was going to come back to was when you said the call out. So one thing that we are purposeful for is back to the scarlet letter analogy. We'll have a conversation with the individual, and they'll automatically be enrolled in these training programs, but they're very personal, very private.
Okay.
I don't even go to the employee's supervisor with this. Now, if you're a repeat offender, we're going to elevate the conversation a little bit, but because what you don't want is someone recognizing, oh shit, I clicked on something I shouldn't, and not call.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Out of fear of because I'd rather have false positives than find out later and this person was hesitant to reach out.
Yeah, we're all on the same team here.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I had, and it was probably, I'll bet it was 7 or 8 years ago. I had been traveling. I received an email from a client. It appeared to be a client, legitimately from his email address, and it was a Dropbox link. And we had been having conversations about some ownership transition, and I kind of thought he was going to be sending me some documents to review. And that's basically what this thing said. Hey, please review the documents. And I went to get, I shouldn't have done it, but I did. I clicked the link, and then my password wasn't working right. And I'm like, finally I got logged in.
Ooh, logged into what?
Exactly. And I didn't give it a whole lot of thought until the next morning. And again, I was traveling and I was looking at my phone. I'm like, I really don't have very many emails. What's going on? Yeah. And long and short, I figured out that I had been compromised. Fortunately, I worked with I did call right away and say, hey, I need some help. But I'll tell you, from that point forward, I am so diligent about being careful. And I'm not saying that I couldn't, screw something up at some point, but man, I don't just click on a link. It scares me to death because it happened once, and now you're just like, I never want to have that happen again.
Well, back to the phishing campaigns, because that's your moment to, I'll say, scare, but it's not a real threat. I'd have HR, the most common clicked ones are if it says it's coming from HR.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Because they're just worried, like, especially if it has words like, pay increase or, discipline.
Yeah.
And I had
your paycheck or something like
right.
that. Yeah.
I had a HR lead come to me upset, like, I'm getting bombarded with these because of your campaigns. I'm like, okay, well, we'll talk about it, but no apologies.
Right.
I mean, because this is, I understand
how they work.
That's right. And so can we minimize your pain and not HR campaign it every time? Mm-hmm. Okay. And I remember the old days when phishing was new, the tendency was to exclude the C-suite because you're not going to put the owner on the spotlight. Right. You want the owner on the spotlight because those are your targets.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're the one with authority to be able to talk to or look like they're communicating with the accounting clerk or whomever it is to go get those gift cards you were talking about a little while ago.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I would say, anecdotally, I would say well over 50% of claims activity involve the C-suite in what we've seen in one way or another. They're targets.
I remember another story, CEO, again, former client, when we were talking about these campaigns and the need to protect, he's like, our company's under the radar. They don't know, for example, who our controller is. So in the moment, I went on Google and I said, who's the controller of this company? Brings up her LinkedIn profile. Right. And he's like, oh, yeah. So these light bulb moments are impactful.
Right.
And, we're not here to bash them or call them out. We're just here to be better,
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about the opportunities for those that are trying to gather this data. It's not just with big multinational companies that are just dealing with healthcare information and social security numbers. I mean, it can be the smallest of companies, right?
Yeah. So first of all, like, there's actual kits you can buy online. I mean, I hate to say this publicly, but if I wanted to get into the ransomware business, for example, I can buy a kit online.
Like a guide, how-to.
Ransomware
for dummies.
Is that going to put you on some national watch list?
Maybe we're going to find out, right? Yeah. But to your point, a very wide net is cast for this. It doesn't matter if you're a Fortune 10 company or you're just your corner dentist office. I always go to that. They're casting a net. And if there's 100,000 opportunities, they just need one. And what's amazing is whoever bites, they already know your revenue and how big you are and how much you're willing to spend to get your information back. Because why would I demand $1 million ransom on a company whose annual revenue is $1 million? Or they right size it to. I mean, there's math and algorithms like these are legitimate businesses. You're going to pay me $100,000 in Bitcoin. It's going to be painful for you, but it's not going to run you into the ground. You're not going to file bankruptcy. There's a whole model to it. But yes, that net is cast wide and far. No one's immune.
Yeah. Bill, you mentioned at the outset that we often find clients and prospects curious about cyber. And, I think our idea, we wish more people were curious, because some people get curious after there's a ransomware attack on their business.
Yeah,
or
that's a great point.
Well,
social
it's the whole thing
engineering,
of that couldn't happen to me, or I'm not big enough or sophisticated enough, or I don't do anything in the outside world. I mean, we're all familiar in this room anyways with the Target breach that happened. I don't know, that's probably been 5 or 6 years ago.
No, but it's, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, that was a mechanical contractor where that actually originated.
So they were the gateway to
the Target and
bridge.
So that's whenever we talk with a construction client, it's like, yeah, you might not be doing this or that, but hey, if you have this, even if you're just holding payroll data, which every company is going to do, there's an opportunity for someone to get in and get that data. And now, if nothing else, you have to deal with monitoring and notification.
I mean, think about that. An HVAC contractor can be your open door. So when we'd love to say every company is a technology company. I mean, I'm not embellishing. They are. Like, every corner of an organization has some level of remote access, of automation, and lean mentality drives this behavior. We want to automate more. We want to scale without having to add headcount. Well, how are you going to do that? You need some level.
That's right.
So, I mean, the scaling and everything, obviously AI is the buzzword of today, right?
It is.
Where do you think that takes us from a cybersecurity perspective?
There's two sides to that coin, right? I love the benefits that AI brings. In fact, we promote it all the time. Like, to watch an email come in from a customer and AI interpret it and serve up the information either automatically to the customer or to a human being to validate and make sure. If I'm like a sales, my company has a sales organization or customer service team, imagine eliminating the mundane. And now you're not an order taker, you're an account manager, So I love all the benefits that come with AI, but the threat actors have the benefits too.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when someone calls me,
it's hard to know the difference between the two.
Yeah. My CEO is calling me, and I'm telling you, it sounds like the CEO. But so that's where back to the MFA.
Right.
If he's calling me with a request and demanding something in the moment, you're going to end the call respectfully, because maybe it's him. Yeah. Then you're going to call him back and say, hey, Dave.
You're going to call him back.
I'm going to, right. And these are education points. Like, there's ways to get around the cleverness.
But that is an indicator. There's almost always a sense of urgency to the request, isn't there?
There is. And there always is a sense of urgency. And I don't care if the building's on fire, a 5-second hang up and callback is not going to cause more damage.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the thing. That's why that continuous education is so important.
Sure. So, Brad, let's talk a little bit about going about procuring cyber insurance. Right. And I guess let's just start with the basics. A lot of kind of package policies already have a little bit of cyber thrown in. What are those all about, and why might that not be what most people really need?
Yeah, the carriers want to address it at some level so that there's clarity that, hey, here we're going to frame it up or bracket with a sublimit of a little bit of cyber throw in, crime throw in, might be $5,000, $10,000. That's not uncommon today in a package policy, but don't mistake that for a full-blown cyber liability and social engineering type policy that is designed to cover the type and magnitude of exposures that you might experience in a business. I think you'll know the difference whether or not you have a full-blown cyber policy or a coverage throw-in by virtue of it's a separate policy. It's probably going to be in the $3,000 to $6,000, $7,000 zone for privately held, a moderate-sized privately held firm. And it'll have its own declarations page and set of terms and conditions. And, we've partnered up with some specialty brokers that are doing nothing but cyber coverage because of the new and emerging risks that present themselves in the forms, endorsements that are found within these policies to try to design a broad platform to trigger coverage.
So
in
these
the event of
things
loss.
Quite often aren't just necessarily off the shelf types of
That's right.
policies.
We don't know what the next exposure is going to be, or what the wrongdoers or hackers are going to try to attempt next. So, trying to partner with specialty groups that are seeking to understand and address these exposures.
Well,
is very
and to
important.
that point about working with specialty groups, I would say, you talked about the $3,000 to $5,000 or $7,000 range for a moderate sized organization. We've seen the fact that these specialty companies that are starting to write or procure these types of coverage, they're wrapping their heads better around the risk associated with it. Certainly, Tony, it's ever changing, right? I mean,
sure.
The bad actors are coming up with something new every day. But when this first came out, and I think the first policies were out in the early 2000s, Internet's brand new, but we've probably seen people start to get serious about this over the last 10 years. But initially, the coverage wasn't terribly robust, but the price was pretty high.
That's right.
And now it's starting to become a little bit more reasonable.
More of a competitive market, but they've bracketed some of the higher end exposures, such as social engineering. But this is where it's so critical to have partners like VCIO and your own internal staff that are overseeing and monitoring and implementing good processes and procedures and training to mitigate the risk. It's just critical. And people get discouraged about even applying for this coverage sometimes because they look at an application, they don't understand 3/4 of the questions.
Well, and that's where
we need Tonys of the world.
Right, Tony, and then the boots on the ground as well.
And the latter I love a lot because, think of it, you're cramming for an exam the day before. You might pass.
Right.
And then that shit escapes me, a week later. Yeah,
I got through college that way.
Yes. But that's where it's important. It's like, okay, you might be doing the right things, but do you have the governance and discipline to keep it? Because if we can prevent a claim for the Gibsons of the world, that's a win for the company, for all of us. Because those policies come up for renewal. Last thing you want is an accelerated rate increase.
Right.
And I know there's all the factors that go into population.
I mean, in this, at the end of the day, we are trying to mitigate risk, right? Whether it's the risk associated with commercial auto or cybersecurity. And the idea of safety or risk mitigation culture and the tone at the top is very important, whether that's talking about how serious your employees feel you are about how they drive and how they go about their job on a daily basis, or how the policies and procedures associated with IT security are governed and reviewed and just implemented, right? It's if you go ahead and you started down the path of saying, Brad, that the going through the application process, people will look at it and say, oh, this is very daunting. We always tell our clients, whether you really think you're going to buy this or not, go through this process. It's going to be a little painful, but it's going to be very enlightening.
It's going to be very enlightening.
I love how you said that, because when I look at these applications and the work that goes into it, it's just good IT.
Yeah.
The policy is the cherry on top, but all the things you look for, and I like that you tailor your solutions to the business and not try to blanket it. Like when someone brings in a large conglomerate organization, it could be anything, insurance, I'm instantly skeptical. I'm going to get high priced and I'm going to get cookie cutter, so that personal touch is important. But yeah, I mean, that's a blueprint for good IT.
Well, and so often, in particular in our construction world, there are so many different pieces of software or technology tools that are out there, whether that's your accounting system, your estimating system, how those interact with other business partners, how you're transferring data between a general contractor and an architecture or engineering firm, what you're doing for payments, how you're capturing data from the field for payroll and hours and all of that. There are so many different silos of technology. I think going through this process, if you haven't done it, or if you don't have someone like VCIO Global from a top-down perspective saying, what do we have and how do these interact and how have we boxed these things in, going through that process is very enlightening, because then you realize what you've got and what maybe you don't have covered.
When you look at mature risk like fire or the operation of an automobile or product liability, I think business owners largely have an understanding of, how to control that. When you ask the question of, what are you doing to enhance or, reduce your cyber risk? That's a tough question for a lot of business owners.
Yeah, it doesn't always resonate.
Yeah, right.
The concept of, you have to have auto insurance, and the joke is, well, if I
statutory
if I didn't have a claim, how come I don't get some of that back? Blah blah blah, right? And I've seen the sticker shock reaction on some of these policies to owners, but it's all part of. It's like, look, what's your profit per day on average? Not your top line. What's your profit per day on average? So you're balking on a policy that is a fraction of 1 day's worth of profit. And if you get hit with ransomware and you're down 7 days, guarantee you not every customer comes back, or they went to a competitor. Usually these are easy conversations, but yeah.
And here's a litmus test as a broker or as a risk advisor, and I think I speak for our industry. If you were to say, if there was a loss with an insured of yours that you had potential coverage concerns, and here's a multiple choice. It's on the property form, it's on the auto form, it's on the workers' compensation form, it's on the excess liability, or it's on the cyber. I bet you 95% or more would say probably cyber. It's so new and emerging, and what the hackers are up to is just really unsettling.
I'm thinking back to a comment you said earlier, and I chuckle because if my wife were sitting here, she was on my ass to get a generator for this home. And I'm like, why? Like, we don't lose power. And if we lose power, it's an hour.
Term.
So what?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you know it? 2 winters ago, we lost power for 3 days. Yeah. We have 2 dogs. One's anxious, so getting outside of her comfort zone's a problem. So we were at my mother-in-law, her mother's, for 3 days. That generator was installed 30 days later.
Right.
So I should walk the talk. So,
yeah. Failure or a loss is a great motivator to,
isn't it?
Prevent it from happening in the future. It's human nature.
And so that's what's so great. It's like, there's always stories to share.
That's right.
And for the customers that we touch and that you touch, you have something that's resident and a little closer to home. We're not referencing. Target's a fun story, but that's not selling it, right? But you think about folks that have been hit by this. It's a small price for peace of mind.
Sure. And again, it's data that you might not think is all that valuable. And maybe you say, no, we don't have any type of funds transfer things that we do electronically. So what are they really going to get? Well, okay, do they in the construction world? Well, do they get access to your project management system? Or estimating system? Does that lock you down? What does it do? But if they get a hold of your payroll data, just the mere fact of dealing with the reporting requirements and monitoring requirements of a company that's got 100 employees. Well, what's that going to cost you? You probably got $100 wrapped up in a year per employee for a couple years just to monitor that. Well, the cybersecurity coverage is going to probably help you, cover the costs associated with that in some fashion and help you make sure that you've got all the other doors closed.
And, all right, so so you're not subject to HIPAA or GDPR or pick your...
Right.
But you're in business, and I'm sure there's an element of your business that's unique to the industry. Right. You're successful for a reason.
Right.
So whether the data is sensitive or not, your exposure is not purely data. It could be systems. It could be...
Oh, most certainly.
Sure.
They get the blueprint they get your secret sauce that makes you work. And again, these companies are not, and I'm not trying to sound apocalyptic. I mean, this is real stuff. Like, they could hold this ransom. Well, your top 5 competitors would love to know what makes you you.
Right. Who your customers are, what your volume is.
Heck,
so here's how you're going to...
We'd just like to see how you estimate this.
That's right.
What margin do you apply?
Yeah, and they're brilliant. They lie in wait, and they wait for the right moment to strike. I mean, the level of sophistication is amazing. So you just want to make sure you're covered.
Or you're doing all you can. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because so there's a fallacy, right? You're never 100% protected.
Right.
You know, I feel like everybody should be 80% out of the box. Yeah. Now, each percentage up you go comes at a cost and a system usability. So what's the right threshold? And as long as we can ensure that if something gets compromised, we're going to shut it down and be able to remediate and isolate immediately, that's all part of that conversation.
You know, we had a client that had a laptop stolen from an employee, and they weren't 100% certain that that laptop would not be accessible to the person that stole it. So I just remember it was a painful loss scenario to go through, because the assumption needs to be that laptop is in the most sophisticated hacker's hands now, and it's going to be mined for all of the data on it. It was very troubling.
That's right. And that's why, you know, the proliferation of cloud services, I used to be a cloud skeptic. My partners they'd always pick on me. It's like, you were the cloud skeptic. It's like, talk about how it's going to save you money, bullshit, you know. And then, so trust me, I've come home. But when it comes to like where you store your information, like, you don't want things resident.
Right.
They take the laptop; it's a hunk of metal.
I mean, I think a lot of people would say, no, we do want it on the tape, you know, backup. I don't want it in the cloud because I don't trust the cloud. I can't see the cloud. I can't feel the cloud. Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, just think of the cloud as the computer sitting next to you. It's just out in the ether. Now, I'm not going to say Microsoft can't be hacked. I mean, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say there's not going to be a hostile takeover. You know. Now, they have subsets of their cloud that they lease out and blah, blah, blah. But they have tens of thousands of people dedicated to this every day. I'm okay with that being out there. And you can encrypt it. It can be backed up. Just because you're in the Microsoft cloud doesn't mean it's not on a backup that's Google-based or Amazon-based. These are conversations, because it's just like if I use AI, I'm exposing all my secrets to the outside world. That's not true. I mean, but it's education, it's conversation. We'll get you there, because Microsoft takes this security very seriously, and there's real products and solutions and protections out there, and we work with clients on how you get there. And
fair to say they're the industry standard?
Oh yeah, that's fair to say. But it doesn't mean you have to go all in. We can phase this in. You know, we do 101 workshops with how to use Copilot in your organization. It's all about comfort, and the fear of the unknown is where you have a lot of hesitation. And the vendors are making the choice for us.
Right.
They're all going cloud, whether you want to or not. Now, can you wave your flag to, I'm going to just use this legacy system forever? I don't know, because how do you secure those legacy systems? You have to be on a current build. Right. So you end up walking into the inevitable.
Yeah, you're going to get there.
Let's start now, man.
Well, that was a very interesting and enlightening conversation, Tony. We appreciate you joining us today to talk about the world of cybersecurity and what you're seeing out there in the marketplace right now, and how you're helping your clients with the vision and strategy associated with how they go about their IT needs.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Appreciate this.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks.